you remember when you got her? You had hours and hours to just drive and dream. You spent your Saturdays fixing whatever needed fixing just to keep her running right. 20 years later, isn't it time you two got reacquainted? When you're ready, we're here. Because at LMC Truck, we know that while time may have passed, your passion for her never faded. Get her back on the road where she and you belong.
Now you're watching Gearz, brought to you by LMC Truck. Keep them on the road.
You know, most people realize that the world of cars and the world of music are two very dynamic places. And there's been a lot of famous people leave their mark in those worlds. And I'm sure you can think of a bunch of them right off the top of your head. But sometimes the most influential person is the one that's working behind the scenes, doing those little things that end up influencing generations. This is a story about one of those people. In the late 1950s, hot rodding and rock and roll were fairly new on the scene and rapidly gaining ground with the youth of America. So it was only natural that young people not only wanted to race cars, but also sing songs about it. This prompted a young artist named Charlie Ryan to write a song called Hot Rod Lincoln.
110 and twisted the speedometer cable off at the end. I had my foot feet clear to the floor. I says that's all there is and there ain't no more.
The song had moderate success for Ryan, which prompted a major artist named Johnny Bond to record the song as well. But to really make it cook, they called on guitar virtuoso Joe Maphis to lay down a smokin' groove. The resulting track became one of the most famous car and guitar songs ever recorded. So just who was this Joe Maphis? Well, in the 1960s, he became known as the King of the Strings for his ability to play anything with strings on it. But it was his blazing guitar work that really set him apart. He'd come out with a double-necked, custom-made Mosrite guitar, and he would rip into that thing and go from neck to neck and do things that just make people go crazy. But unfortunately, hard living and a drinking problem led to a career that danced in and out of the spotlight, and health problems finally cut his life short in the late 1980s. But not before master guitar builder R.C. Allen built him a one-of-a-kind archtop guitar to recognize his musical contributions. Unfortunately, just like Joe, that guitar had a rough life and eventually ended up broken and discarded until a certain guitar-playing car nut found it and rescued it. Now, when I first got this thing, man, it was rough. It had a big split in the back of the neck, and there were eye bolts where the strap should be, and the neck was warped, and the binding was coming off, and the pickups didn't work very well. But I actually used it on a couple of recordings because it sounded so good. But I knew it needed to be restored. But just like a car, it had to be done in such a way that we didn't lose the magic and the character of what this is. Enter Jonathan McClanahan, master luthier and woodworker. I knew by his work on his custom mandolins that he could fix the Maphis guitar. That neck on that thing is phenomenal.
It looks like with this right here that the fibers are in good condition under there. I will have to apply just ever so slightly pressure down to get it to gap a little bit.
Yeah.
To get the wood down in there. And such is the case with any guitar. There's not a lot of meat here on the back side of that truss rod.
Yeah.
And that's not a hard thing to fix as well. That's a good clean crack right there as well. So this will be an excellent repair.
The first order of business was fixing that cracked neck.
So I'm going to steam your neck, and then I'm going with hot water, and then I'm going to slowly pull that down to where I can get that gap under there. So then I can get the glue in there, then press it, and then glue it, and then it's done.
Then the other damage was fixed, but careful attention was made not to remove any of the bumps and bruises that gave the guitar its story and its character. The final result is a guitar that plays and sounds better than it did when it was new, but still retains all the scars and all the patina of the hard-fought battles. Kind of like Joe himself and those legendary licks he laid down so many years ago. Kind of like the car in the song and its prophetic ending. Son, you're gonna drive me to drinking if you don't quit driving that hot rod Lincoln.
And now, the Gladiator Search and Rescue Build, powered by Bestop.
Hey everybody, it's time for the next step in our Jeep Gladiator Search and Rescue Build. Now today we are going to get serious about this bed, because this is where most of the search and rescue action is going to happen. Now I know the first question that you probably have when you look at this bed is, man, that thing is small, and it is. It's virtually identical in size to the original bed on the old original Scrambler Jeeps, which means it's 5 feet from tailgate to bulkhead, 56 inches across, which means it is too small to carry cargo like a traditional truck bed. But it's too big to be considered an auxiliary cargo area. It is a real bed. So how do you utilize something like this? Well, we're going to show you how to do that by thinking literally outside the box. We're not going to go long and wide like this. We're going to go up. Take a look. Now, what you're looking at is called the overlanding rack, and it comes from Fab 4s. Now, this is a heavy-duty racking system that will not only give you additional use to your bed, but it will also utilize this dead area right here. Now, the best part is this goes together like an erector set, utilizing holes that are already in the bed. So there's no drilling, you just bolt it in. First, we'll bolt the sides on. Look at that, isn't that awesome? I love the way that slides up under that rail. Then the top tube sections. And finally, the front and rear caps and cross members. Now, as you can see, this rack gives us all kinds of extra cargo space to hang things or put them up on top. I mean, this is perfect for an outdoorsman or a contractor, that kind of thing. And the aftermarket is full of all kinds of products that you can hang from this rack and utilize this area even better. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This is a sliding rack system from Cargo Glide, and it's designed to store your gear up off the floor so it doesn't get kicked around. Now, it'll mount right to the cross members of the rack there, but before we do that, we're going to scuff it up, get some shark hide on it to protect it, then we'll get it in place. Then we'll bolt the bodies to the cross members and reassemble everything. Now, check this out. Just insert the handle, release the lock, and pull out the rack. It'll lock in place when it hits the end. Now what this does, it gives you a place to hang bags, hunting gear, fishing gear, emergency equipment, all that stuff that generally takes up all the room on the floor. Now, the top of the rack is another place to store cargo. But anytime you start going up, well, it gets harder and harder to reach your stuff out here. And that's not a good thing for a search and rescue rig. Fortunately, we have a solution for this. Take a look. This is the Cargo Glide roof slide. And at first glance, it seems like a normal roof basket that bolts to your existing rack. But there is nothing normal about this particular setup. With the roof slide, when you want access to your gear up on top, you just flip the lock and give it a tug. And it comes down to you and locks in place. Now you can load on your gear, your bicycles, your kayaks, all of your camping gear. You've got little boxes here to put small stuff. Strap it down, and then when you're ready to go back up, you just give it a push and it locks in place. That is a game changer. All right, the last thing to put on was some sort of side protection, because the Gladiators don't come with any. So we put on some step sliders from Rock Slide because we want some protection on the sides of this truck. Now, the reason we went with them is because these are made out of heavy gauge steel. So they're actually going to protect the sides of the truck from rocks and brush and trail damage. But they also have a heavy duty mounting system, so you can load a whole bunch of guys on these steps and they're not going to bend or break off. But the best part is when you open the door, they have an auxiliary step that comes down. Then when you shut the door, it retracts back up. And it hides so well into the step slide that you don't even know it's there. Is that cool or what? Now, obviously, on a stock Jeep, that sliding roof rack and those side steps, really not that important. But if you get this thing up in the air, you get a lift on it and bigger tires, those are going to get really important. And we're going to prove that to you. But not today. That's enough for today.
And now, Seal Tech, brought to you by Steel Rubber Products, helping restore the car of your dreams.
When you get involved in any kind of an automotive project, whether it's an original restoration or a custom build, eventually you're going to have to deal with one thing: weather stripping. But before you can even think about putting new weather stripping in, your old glass has got to come out, preferably without breaking it. So that's what we're going to look at today. Now, there are several different ways a piece of glass is mounted into a body. The first is they take a piece of rubber weather stripping and mount the glass flush to the metal flange. The second is where they use a piece of weather stripping to mount the glass to the outside of the flange, like on this International. Then, of course, the third is where they use a piece of rubber to mount the glass to the inside of the flange, like on this Ford. And then finally, you have the type of glass that is bonded in place with an adhesive. And that's a different technique, and we're not going to mess with that today. Now, why is this important? Well, it's kind of going to dictate how your glass is going to come out. Now, if you're dealing with old, nasty, brittle rubber weather stripping, the best way to get it out is to take a razor knife and then make your cut here in the middle of the rubber. Now, where you make that cut is kind of going to be dictated on if the glass is to the outside or the inside or in the middle. But a good rule of thumb is right about in the center. You're going to want to go all the way in, because what you want to do is remove the piece of rubber that's holding the glass to the flange. Now, what you don't want to do is take a screwdriver and go in here and try to pry the glass out. That'll just break it. You don't want to try to keep that old rubber, just replace it. And unless you want to end up in the ER, you need to be really careful cutting that rubber out, because you're going to be pushing hard, you're going to be pulling toward yourself, and it's really easy to slip off and lay open your leg, your abdomen, your arms, all kinds of nasty stuff. So be careful. Now, you'll want to cut all the way around the glass except for the last 3 or 4 inches. And the point here is to remove the rubber from around the glass and the metal flange. Now, once you have the rubber cut most of the way around, you should be able to carefully loosen the glass and remove it. Once again, be careful not to put it in too much of a bind and crack it, especially big flat pieces like a windshield. Now, I know you're probably wondering, why did you not cut those last 3 or 4 inches? Well, if you'll take a look here, now we have a perfect cross section of our original weather stripping. So if we can't find an OEM replacement, we can match that up with something from the Steel Rubber Universal Catalog, and we can get weather stripping on our vehicle. Now, for a Jeep CJ, this is no big deal. Rubber is easy to find. But if you're working on something odd like a 59 Ford panel or a 69 International cab over, well, you're going to be glad you saved yourself a sample of this.
And now, Parts Bin.
Everybody knows that one of the most important parts of your suspension is the shocks, for dampening the rebound of your springs, especially in an off-road situation. That's why Skyjacker came out with the Black Max shock. Now this is a twin tube design with foam cell technology, which means as the shock is working, getting hot, that foam cell insert compresses to compensate for the oil expansion so the shock keeps working and doesn't fade out. Also, the extra oil in the body helps keep temperature down, and that foam cell technology also keeps air from getting in the shock, which means you can mount this in any direction. So, if you're looking for a shock that will work on-road or off-road whenever you're ready, you're thinking Skyjacker Black Max. You know, one of the most popular upgrades to do to a project vehicle, other than the engine, is suspension, because we all want our vehicle to handle. But usually this requires a lot of cutting and welding and fabricating by the builder to make it happen. And not everybody has the time or the skills or the tools to do that. Well, Fat Man Fabrication decided to do something about that, and they came out with a bolt-in independent front suspension for the 65 through 70 Mustangs and Cougars. Take a look. The first thing you'll notice is it does away with those bulky shock towers to make more room for bigger engines. Then for strength, they add these 1/4-inch steel liners that bolt to the original frame rails all the way from the floor to the bumper mounts to give you the strength and the rigidity that you need. The mounts for the control arms and the coilover shocks interlock with each other and the rail liners to form an extremely strong structure. And once again, this is a bolt-in deal. It also comes fully loaded with RideTech coilover shocks, power rack and pinion steering, sway bar, and 11-inch brakes. And you can get it with motor mounts for the Coyote, the Modular, the small block, or the big block Ford engines as well. So if you have an early Mustang or Cougar and you want to bolt in an independent front suspension, well, Fat Man Fabrication's who you need to call. You know, controlling underhood temperatures is always a challenge, and nothing generates heat like the exhaust system. But how do you control that? Simple, with DEI's titanium exhaust wrap. Check this out. Now, they take pulverized lava rock and they strand it into a fiber material, and then they weave it together to give you an extremely pliable material that you then can wrap your header with or your exhaust pipe to give it a cool carbon fiber look. But the look is only part of it. The biggest issue is that this stuff will handle up to 1800 degrees direct temperature or up to 2500 degrees intermittent temperature. It's also resistant to abrasion, oil, vibration, that kind of thing, so you know it's going to last. Now, to hold this in place and keep it from coming unraveled, they have these stainless steel locking ties and then a special tool that tightens those ties down. So once you get those on, tightened in place, you know it's not going to come unraveled, it's not going to come off. If you're battling with heat under your hood and you think your exhaust is the culprit, DEI can help you with that problem. If you've got a newer Jeep vehicle with a 3.6-liter engine, you know they can be a little lacking in the performance department, especially if you put on a whole bunch of heavy accessories. Well, ProCharger's got a solution for that with their supercharger kits for the Jeep Wrangler and the Gladiator. Now check this out. It comes with an intercooler and all the hoses and hardware you're going to need for that. Then you have the centrifugal supercharger and new fuel injectors and the tuning module and the wiring and the surge kit and the hardware and all the brackets that you're going to need to bolt on over 50% more power. That's over 100 horsepower for those of you that are counting. And the best part is ProCharger designs these for you to put them on in your garage. And you'll never know what's on there until you stomp the pedal when you're running down the road or pulling a load, and then you'll know. If you're a little disappointed in the performance of your Jeep, ProCharger can help you with their supercharger kits.
And now, what are you working on? Brought to you by Painless Performance Products. American made, American proud.
Today's What Are You Working On comes from Darren Curry from Alexandria, Kentucky, and this is his project. What is it? Nobody knows what it is. They don't even know what it is. They created it. This thing started out as a joke. They were in college and they noticed that the car parking places were always full, but the bike places were always empty. And they said, why don't we build something that we can park with the motorcycles, and this is what they built. He got a Gold Wing 1200 motorcycle that had been wrecked, and he started building. Now first, they got the engine running, then they got a bunch of tubing and started building a chassis that only existed in their minds. Oh, this is getting better and better. The front suspension was robbed from a Volkswagen Jetta, and while Darren, his dad, and his brother built the chassis and got the engine running, did the mechanical stuff, he said his mom built 2 bucket seats from scratch. Take a look at these. Those are pretty cool. He said, unfortunately, it took 2 years to finish this thing. So he already had graduated college. So he never got a chance to park it at the school in the motorcycle place. But he says he loves to drive this vehicle, and he keeps on adding just one more thing. He wants to put a turbo on it, do all kinds of crazy stuff. Darren, great project, man. To help you out, we hooked up with our buddies at Woodward Fab. We're gonna give you one of these metal shears because I know that you could use something like this. Also, we're gonna give you one of our project planning books because you have got to have this to keep track of whatever you're doing on that thing. Also, we're gonna give you one of our Gearz t-shirts because obviously you are a certified gearhead, and we're gonna give you a gift card from Painless Performance so you can set up the wiring on that vehicle. We're gonna give you a gift card from LMC Truck because I guarantee you there's a bunch of stuff in this catalog that you can graft onto that project. And finally, we have got to give you one of our little Gearz tow trucks just to commemorate all the junk you have drug home and bolted together. Well, that wraps it up for us today. Hopefully you feel inspired to get out there, start working on something, which is the perfect opportunity for you to go out and find something and start working on it. So get out there and get to it. We'll see you next time.